Now, that's the theme of the Neijing. We're done. We're done with the history. We're done with explaining the construct of how it's arranged. Now we're like, okay, that's cool, but why did he even do this? Like, what's the purpose of the Neijing? Is it because to that Huangdi kind of predicted that the Neijing is going to reach Americans and then it's going to reach South Americans and we're going to have this guy, Korean Ivan, transmitting the Neijing? Probably not, right? So, what is the purpose of the Neijing? At that time, the design of the Neijing is stated in the abstract. You know how scientific papers have abstracts in the beginning, right? That's kind of what the Ling Shu also tells us. The 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 Huang basically, I think it's in the beginning of it, right? It tells us the Huangdi or the Huangdi. Remember, Huangdi is the author. Remember, Huangdi is not the actual author. He's just the embodiment of what this Ling Shu author is using to transmit his brainwashing, not his Chinese medicine message, and he's using Huangdi. But remember, Huangdi came years before. That was, he's like from the before in the Shang dynasty. Like the first dynasty. He's like super old. Um, so of course that's a myth. And he remarks the intention, but in this chapter he remarks the intention of the Ling Shu. And this was likely the real Ling Shu author wrote this. Huangdi asked Chibo, or says to Chibo, um, and he says, I am I am subordinate to all people. Um, nourishing. Actually, this comes from Paul Anschaull. I didn't want to translate this, so this is from the Ling Shu translation. Okay, if you know Paul Anschaull, he's a former translator of the Ling Shu. Check it out if you don't have his translation. It's still the best Ling Shu translation out there, even though there's problems with it, but it is still the best. Anyways, he says, I am subordinate to all the people. Basically, I am subjugated to the people. This is the Huangdi saying this, right? Nourishing the common people and receiving their taxes. I lament, I'm sad when they're unable to give their dues. And this is associated with their diseases. I wish that they are not affected by toxic medication and without having to resort to using pointed stones. He's basically saying, I wish he didn't have to take all this Wutol, all this aconite, all these poisonous things to cure the diseases. I wish there were a simpler way, essentially. Rather, I wish that they make the use of this super important of these fine needles. Wei Jen. Wei means like this idea of Wei Jen, fine small needles, revolutionized acupuncture. Okay? To open their channels and vessels, to harmonize their blood and qi, honoring the meeting of Shun against, Nishun, compliant and obedience and contrary, exiting and entry of the Jingluo. He's basically saying that the reason that people get diseases is because it's almost a political message here. There's a political message, and when the emperor fails to nourish the people don't pay their taxes. Okay? And what that taxes means is both political and medical. What is the taxes of the body? And who's the emperor? The emperor is the heart. And what are the taxes? He basically tells us harmonize their blood and chi. Blood and chi are the taxes. Kind of like in feng shui, they say money is just blood and chi. Like if you have a problem with money, You have a problem with the flow of chi, like money just chi. Taxes are just chi. Um, so and when this is not met, this taxation, then people get sick. Why do they get sick? Because part of it they can't nourish themselves. And so they kind of go against the laws of heaven, right? Remember the emperor in China was always called as Tiansi, right? This heavenly prince or Tianwang, this heavenly emperor. Like the emperor is always said to have the Tianming of heaven. So that's why you pay him taxes, because you're kind of honoring heaven. Different than United States, right? We don't really think our president's like endowed with Tianming, but actually that's not true. Even in the U.S., for example, I don't know how it is in Chile, Argentina. What's the dollar thing say? In God we trust. So there's almost like the the leader always is supposed to kind of impart and be an emissary for heaven, for the people. But of course, we know that's not true if we look at the common government. But um, this is the message that the Ling Shu author is trying to say to us. And the wage and the fine needles are a way to kind of interfere or intervene without having to use this toxic medication, right? Um, through the Jingduo, through the channels and collaterals. Okay. So then he says, so knowledge can be transmitted to subsequent generations. So he's basically telling us um, this needs to be transmitted. So actually, I was actually wrong. What me and Corey are doing is actually the purpose of it. He wants us to transmit this. It must be the law for which is illuminated. It shall be such that nothing is ever lost and that the transmission continues for a long time without interruption. To see to it that they are applied easily and difficult to forget. They should be laid down in commonly valid structures. They should be worded in separate paragraphs, distinguishing outer and inner, and creating a complete set from beginning to end. It should be such that all this is given a physical form, and hence a needle classic is to be established first. I wish to be informed of its nature. This is the purpose of the Neijing laid out to us in chapter 1. Kind of hidden in sight, actually. To Hualo Shang says, hey, that's what it is. Um, so to break it down, it's kind of like this distinguishing outer and inner. I think part of it is telling you, hey, this is the message. This is the Ling Shu is the inner, right? The Suan is the outer. Maybe you could interpret it that way. But also, you could think about it from a Jingduo perspective. These are the outer aspect. These are the inner aspects. Like think about the Jingduo trajectories, or think about as we're going to see further unraveling. The outer is what we call the biao, the branch, and the inner we could say is more the ben, right? The root and branch. Like these are the points that form the basis of Jingduo. That's why he's kind of saying the that it should form a beginning and end, and then have like a structural form. That literally kind of is creating the structure of the Jingduo for us. So it has multiple meanings here. It's political, it's tangible, right? It's textual, so, you know, yeah, that's what I have to say about that.